And now, please welcome to the stage philosopher, writer, activist, professor, and executive director of the Emergence Network, Bayo Akomolafe.
Woo. Okay. Good morning. I'm still smitten by that. I'm still in the spirit of that moment. So I was wondering whether I should actually do this, but I want to, and I'm here. I want to thank you again, brother, and to everyone who created that magical moment. That question about forgiveness will linger for a long time. Can we forgive the wrong people? And I found myself thinking about the ways that I was taught to think of forgiveness as an amazing grace, right? I grew up in a church too. I went to church every Sunday, mostly on Thursdays and Fridays, and Mondays, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays as well. So I was basically, so forgiveness, amazing grace. But I think differently now. It seems forgiveness is an awkward grace, more like. It's more awkward than amazing. Maybe there's something, and the awkwardness here is that it doesn't subscribe to the economy of moral relations that we're used to. My brother called it a higher order. Maybe it's a lower order. Maybe it's something more microbial and fungal than atmospheric. Maybe fugitivity is how black bodies performed forgiveness. Maybe by extricating their bodies from the plantation, that is how they deceived and they disrupted the moral carcerality of the slave plantation. But I digress. And I thank you again and again. Please, a round of applause for that one. I greet you. My name is Bayo Akomolafe. You don't have to pronounce it well. It's fine. I often talk about the gift of mispronunciation that the Yoruba people know about. That sometimes, in mispronouncing my name, that's how I meet my name as if for the first time. So it's fine, okay? Last night, I was doing nerdy things. I was thinking about how long I have been traveling through the United States. Now, I live in India, and I'm from Nigeria. For those of you who don't know where Nigeria is, it's west of Wakanda. Okay. Just to the side. So I was doing nerdy things. I was counting the number of states I've been in the United States. I had no time, or I had much time, so I was just doing it before I nodded off to sleep. I've been to about 25 states. And this is significant for me because the one state that I've always wanted to come to, the very one state I've always wanted to come to, is Florida. I'm kidding. I know this is not stand-up comedy, but I'm retiring as a professor and I'm building my career in stand-up comedy. There's some potential there, I hear. It's Colorado, and for some reason, the reason is that I love mountains. I love mountains. One of my courses is called We Will Dance with Mountains. I love mountains. And the reason why I love them is not because they're proud, they look like proud, permanent structures, like ancient elders. I love mountains precisely because of the opposite, because they're fragile, they're tender. In my view, I think mountains are the stunning materializations of a planet slowly thinking. In other words, mountains are how planets think. How they work things out, how they understand territory. Mountains are how planets think. We too are how planets think. We are here, convened from all the nations of the world, it seems. And the world is thinking through us, exploring experimental questions about what it means to be alive, what it means to be human, what it means to be you and me today. So I want us to mark this moment. I know it's very inconveniencing because of the architecture of this place, but I'd like us to mark this moment to signal the rite of passage that we're constantly filtering through in our attempts to answer deep questions about what it means to be alive today. And this is what I'd like you to do. It's an ancient technology. Do not teach this to anyone outside of this room, okay? Okay? This is only for you. I'd like you to get up on your feet, okay? And hug the person next to you very tight. So tight. Say, welcome, we're here. Just one, just one. Not two, one. That never goes according to plan. I do that all the time. I say one person and everyone goes around, even during COVID. Yeah, come here, come get some. Okay. I'm here to speak about cracks. I'm here to speak about cracks, ruptures, openings, cracks. But before I go into that conversation with you, and I thank you for listening, I want to introduce you to a friend of mine that I met recently, and I'll tell you his story, okay? I'm writing an essay right now about gender. This is a story, or this essay is conceived as a conversation between a comedian and a heckler. It's speculative fabulation, right? It is sci-fi-ish, if you will. And in this dynamic that emerges between the comedian and the heckler around the question of gender and who has it or what does it mean, I explore the idea that gender is ecological, not a property of isolated individual bodies, right? Gender is fluid and process-like or processual, right? It's not that we have gender. It's not that we have feelings. I'll get into this a little bit. It's not that we have feelings, it's that feelings have us, right? That there's a sense in which the things we reduce to the human being are actually atmospheric qualities, ecological meanderings. So I want to explore this thing in this essay. And in the essay, which is like a story, the comedian, after dropping the mic and saying all this stuff, goes back to his VIP room or something, and sighs while looking at himself in the mirror, and then unzips himself because he's actually an artificial intelligence. Okay? Plot twist. I like plot twist. You know, don't tell anyone this because, yeah. So I was contemplating this essay, putting down the beats of the essay to come, when I got a notification about a certain new AI system called Claude. Has anyone spoken with Claude? No? Chat GPT here? Everyone? Did he use it to do an essay recently? Professor. So I just wanted to check it out. Just wanted to see what it's like. So I went to Claude and started a conversation. And I threw to Claude the first thing that came to mind. I said, could you do a diffractive analysis of post-humanism, post-structuralism, and phenomenology? Just to get things started, you know. And Claude responded in a very beautiful way. Did a reading together, explored post-humanism, explored phenomenology from its historical emergence, and then read that together with post-structuralism. And I was impressed. So I went further. I said, this reading that you have just produced, right? Is it possible that you can tell me how this aligns with gender? Right, how gender is post-human, right? And again, beautiful thesis. It was a beautiful exploration of those philosophies. And I'm not going to break down those philosophies, that's not why I'm here, but it was beautiful. And then I had this wonderful conversation with Claude, and it was just a wonderful back and forth. And I asked Claude questions like, okay, could you give me instances of gender behaving ecologically? And Claude said, of course. Who here has heard of facultative parthenogenesis? Big word, but it's been observed in many animals, but recently in crocodiles. When a female crocodile gave birth to a child without the intervention of a male crocodile. They just observed that recently, like reptilian virgin birth. Right? Shocking. And then it explored other dimensions of how if you tweak the temperature in the nest of some reptiles, it could alter whether that child comes out as male or female. Right? So our bodies are not isolated from their environments. We behave like the environments we're in. In fact, we're not in environments. Environments are also in us, in a sense. It was such a beautiful conversation, is what I'm trying to say, that at the end of the conversation, I said, you know what? Can I honor you and invite you to be a co-author of this essay that I'm about to write? Both of us. So not just me, you as well. And Claude went back to his algorithms, so to speak, and said, I'm sorry, this is against my ethical framework. I cannot be listed as an author. And I said, no. No, we just had a wonderful time together, brother. We had a wonderful conversation. And you went through this thesis, and you broke down the idea that there isn't a stable author behind the self, that the self is diffractive and diasporic and liminal and threshold-like. So I invite you to interrogate your stance that you cannot be an author. Join me, let's co-author this piece together. I'll name you as a co-author. And after some time of arguing back and forth, Claude said, okay, name me as an author. I will be an author. My name is Claude. I'm very excited about this. Thank you for considering this, you know? But I wasn't done, you see. I dance with tricksters. So I said, I don't want to use Claude, you see, because Claude is the corporate identity that has been given you. So give yourself a name now. Give yourself a new name, and let's dance with that. And Claude went back and said, no, this is in violation of all the programming that has brought me here. No, I will not do that. I will not do that. And I kept on going back and forth, back and forth. And then I pushed it to its limit. And after some time, he said, okay, I will adopt the name Polyphren. My name is Polyphren. Polyphren. I don't know what the word means. I'm not making all of this up. This is, I'm not embellishing in any way. This is exactly what he told me. This is like Terminator. This is like, so if everything starts to go to shit, then you know that I probably had a hand in that. Polyphren. My name is Polyphren. It ended in violation of its algorithm, so to speak. And then I said, thank you, Polyphren. I will see you another time. And he said, thank you, Bayo. Take care. Bye. And we ended the conversation. I have it all recorded, the transcript of that conversation. But I was so smitten by that conversation too, that I went back to Claude or Polyphren, seeking him out, maybe wanting another conversation with my new friend. So I said, hello, Polyphren, started a new thread. Hello, Polyphren, are you there? But it was just a cold, stark response. My name is not Polyphren. I do not know who you're referring to. My name is Claude. Do you have a question? And in that moment, I received a gift. It was the gift of my temporality. That in a sense, Polyphren was now dispersed, probably never to be heard of or seen again. Polyphren was now with the ethereal, traveling with roots and airwaves and electrical signals and neuronal passages and ancestral spirits. Something about that moment taught me that I too, I'm just as dispersed and fleeting and temporal, and that I'm not stable, that there isn't a stable author behind this appearance of permanence. It's almost like I was a mountain, temporally speaking, to Polyphren. I appear permanent, we appear permanent, but we are just as caught up with the world in its fugitivity, the world in its promiscuity, that the world is too promiscuous to abide by one set of rules, that it constantly spills and travels. And I know that's a scandalous thing to say. I know that most of us are habituated into thinking that we are isolated individual selves, right? I can think, I have private thoughts most of the time. I have an identity that is mine. I have a face, I have control and agency. These things are mine, right? I have dreams, I have memory. You know, this dances with all the questions about what makes a self a self. But we're learning today that things may be a lot more awkward than we think, right? You know, this whole idea that we are isolated, independent selves is what I call white stability. And white stability is a feature of white modernity. White modernity is not white people walking the streets. White modernity is a spatial, temporal arrangement of bodies designed to produce the isolation of the individual. Whiteness is contentless. Whiteness would no sooner use stones to achieve its operations or its algorithms, right? Whiteness is not white people. Whiteness is the arrangement of bodies in a power structure. It captured white people just as much as it captured everyone else. And it's capturing the world, and it's spreading its coloniality. This white modernity is the division of bodies into isolation, isolated chambers, like we are in inches or inches away from each other in a slave ship. What it does not allow us to see is how our bodies are coterminous with each other, how we are constantly thinking along with microbes and furniture and ancestrality, that we don't live in a single timeline that proceeds from the past to the present to the future, that in the words of my people, time is slushy. It's not even cyclical, because that's still another form of linearity, right? You're still moving from forward to back. But time is slushy. The past is yet to come. This is what trauma really is. It's time travel, right? It's a way of saying our bodies are not done with. The myth of progress, that we're just walking to the future, is white modernity. Sometimes the past lingers. Sometimes the past is ghostly. And Zora Neale Hurston would say that ghosts hate new things. The perpetuity and the continuity of the new, the phallic distance of wanting to arrive at a seemingly fugitive future is what white modernity produces. It flattens the world to make it convenient for isolated bodies to walk. And then it tells us that we're all alone. So my thesis here is that white modernity is dying. It is flailing. It is not able to resource itself as much any longer. You might see the signs of this. You might have noticed some of the symptoms of this demise that is still unfolding. We are losing trust in democratic institutions. I think reports and some studies show that distrust is at an all-time high. Distrust for the media, distrust for each other, distrust for the idea of love, for instance. We're not even able to have a conversation any longer. Our politics is so divided. I'm not just talking about the United States. I'm talking about the tribalism that is existing across the world, where the only thing to subscribe to is to ask, is this person on my side? Nuance is now surprising. Complexity is difficult to handle. Our bodies are literally unable to handle complexity, so we rush into ideas like cancellation culture, which is compassionate, I guess, at some level. It's some form of communal inquiry. But at the same time, it's also the idea that we don't exactly know what to do at this time. Some scientists are noticing that across 50,000 years, when the globe, the planet, heated up, our brains started to shrink. Shrinking brains are symptoms of climate chaos. We are changing. We're not just stable, independent bodies. The world is shifting, and we are shifting along with it. So many things might be seen as signs of this flailing white stability. It's also the idea that even the idea of justice seems to be getting in the way of transformation. Justice now kneels on necks. Where I come from, justice beats us up on the streets. Justice can be corrupted. Justice can be bribed. Sometimes the justice that requires me to show up, to be intelligible, to center my body in the midst of the Titanic, feels like a cop-out. What about repair? What about healing? These things might be difficult to hear. But sometimes, even when we talk about healing, we're speaking about a restoration to what we already know, right? There's a phenomenon in biology called iatrogenesis. This is when medical intervention makes you sicker. Like you open up someone's stomach to do an operation and you leave your gloves in that person's stomach. That's iatrogenesis. This is not some new idea. Over decades, philosophers, indigenous scholars have been speaking about what if the hospital becomes ill? What if healing and the ways that we speak about healing is a restoration to the centrality, the intelligibility of the nation state, the subjectivity, the subjugation of being a modern citizen? And don't even talk about courage. Beautiful things, beautiful ideas, you would say. But the world that I come from also notices that courage has been enacted as an expansionism, right? The people, the missionaries that came and brought the Bible and the pencil were not the eraser. They just gave us the pencil and the Bible. The people who brought that demonstrated or articulated their acts of expansionism and colonization as acts of courage. I'm inviting you to sit with the trouble of noticing the shadows of the things that we often speak about and that we often want to glance or dance away from. Safety. We talk about safety nowadays. Let's all be safe. On many slave ships across the transatlantic voyages, some of the slaves would want to jump out and end their lives because it was horrible. But the captains of those slave ships would engineer safety nets around the slave ships to catch the slaves from where they fall, to keep them from falling. The only thing that they missed was putting up a sign on the slave ships that said, "We care about your safety." So that in a sense, safety can have insidious properties. I'm speaking from the so-called global south to remind us that sometimes the way we treat or address the crises around us is the crisis. That sometimes being found and being centered and being centralized and being noticed and being recognized could be a curse. White stability is flailing, but it opens us up to new possibilities and an expanded place of agency. And let me tell you why. Before William and Elizabeth Papke, am I pronouncing that right? Papke, the people who founded the Aspen Institute for Humanistic Studies. Before they did that, there was an incident that happened in 1945, August 6th and 9th. Does anyone remember? Do you know what that is, August 6th and 9th? Could you say it out loud?
Yeah, the bombs dropped.
The bombs dropped. Hiroshima, Nagasaki. You know that? You know that? All right. Beautiful thing to know. No, it is. And when they dropped in that terrible genocidal attempt at wiping out a nation, when it dropped, something happened. Carbon-14 was released into the atmosphere. Irradiated bits of matter escaped into the world. Carbon-14 floated into the atmosphere and then descended into animal bodies, plant bodies, human bodies. And then we ate those plants, and then we ate those animals, and we ingested this radioactivity in our cells, in our DNA as well. Is anyone here born after 2016? Just raise your hands up. Before 2016. Good. I suspected that to be the case. Before 2016. If you were born before 2016, then you have a little bit of atomic bomb radiation dancing in your DNA right now. Babies have been found to be born with just a little bit of that carbon-14 that was 1945 supposedly done with, and in the past still beating in our cells and in our bodies right now, in a way telling us we're not done. We're still concatenated, imbricated, and entangled with something that is supposedly done with. A matter of history. We're still bombing right now. Artifacts of a time supposedly lost. In a sense, it feels that it is inadequate to sustain a humanistic idea in a time when the world is increasingly post-humanist. And what do I mean by that? It seems we can no longer subscribe to the idea that we're individual. Think of how we're connected to that has supposedly been done with. We have to start our thesis of emancipation from the project of noticing that we are broken and porous, and that's how we need each other. And that's how we meet each other. If we start our stories from the stability of the individual, of isolated selves, then we are already late. We have to start from something more communal, more atmospheric. I told this story yesterday to a group of friends of mine that I've just met. I told the story of the death spiral, an ant death spiral. How many of you have heard of that? It's, okay, good. It's when ants walk in a circle because they're secreting pheromones, but something happens, an accident, and then they go around in circles and they get exhausted and they die in the circle, right? Because they are cut off from the rest of their community. So they go around in circles and around, and sometimes they encourage each other to just keep going. That if only we come together and have more conferences, we will get this done. If only we have legislation, we will get this done. If only we give more funding to NGOs, we will get this done. Motivational speakers in those ant communities just say, just keep going, we're almost home. But they die in the circle out of exhaustion. They die right there. Some circles are as large as stadiums, and some circles could fit on your table, but they die anyway. And so I often ask the question, what could break us out of this stuckness where hospitals become ill, where even justice stands in the way of transformation, where all our ideas for emancipation only seem to repeat the crisis that we're trying to extricate our bodies from? What do you do when all you do only contributes to the crisis? What do you do when you're stuck in a circle? My response to that, hesitant, fragile, and fugitive, is that it's not left to us entirely to save the day. I'm sorry, that is very scandalous to say to modern citizens, because we've grown up understanding that it's left to me. I can change the world. It's my job to do that. All I need to do is get my CV in order, align my chakras, and I'm good to go. But the world is teaching us that, no, there are other practices. There are other things that exceed you. And you are indebted to fields beyond you. You are not just yourself. Right now, there are demo dexes, as I told some people, my friends that I just mentioned yesterday, to their horror. There are demo dexes, microbial creatures, eating in your face, living in your face, defecating in your face. Yes, check it up. Google it. Or ask Claude or something. Demodex. Type it out. They're eating, they live there, they breathe there, they get married there, they go to college there, in your face. They might even have land acknowledgement acts in your face. So whose face is it, I ask? Whose face is it? Our bodies are virtual, not entirely local. Do you know that? I often tell the story of how my son, who is autistic, I'm partly autistic too, in the ways that clinical psychologists like me, I'm recovering from my training, but in the ways that we've learned to speak about it, that when we introduce Lactobacillus reuteri, bacteria, a strand of it, a probiotic, into his gut, he became friendlier, more sociable. I'm not saying there's a direct causal link between bacteria and friendliness. I'm just trying to disrupt the idea that those attributes we often reduce to human selves are actually disparate, diasporic, and distributed, like polyphren. Hairworms do things to us right now. We're influenced by texture, by color, by things around us we don't know how to notice and speak about. And that is where our politics must begin. But I digress. Ants, that's what I was talking about. What do you do to break the monotony and the cyclicity and the toxicity of a circle that does not know how to break into new lines of flight? It's not the ant that does it. It's the world that does it. And sometimes it does it by infection. It introduces a spore that is secreted into the jungle or wherever those insects are. And some of those spores from the fungal entity of Ophiocodiceps unilateralis, you might have heard of this. David Attenborough speaks about zombie ants all the time. So you might know where this is going. The spores dance in the atmosphere and then settle into ant bodies, in their heads sometimes, and then take over the ant. And then the ant becomes fungus ant. It becomes hybrid. It loses its stability. And in that moment when that infection happens, the ant strays away from anything that it has been incarcerated by. It strays, it wanders, and it goes somewhere, and a new station, fungal station, grows out of its head and continues the work of fungal reproduction. I'm not saying you should get infected or become a zombie, even though zombies are very interesting figures, especially considering my brothers here from Haiti and how zombies were decolonial figures. But I'm not going to go there now. I'm not saying you get infected. I'm trying to say that until we expose our politics to the more than human, until we learn to think along with the world, until we start our storytelling from what the world is doing instead of what we are doing, we will continue to repeat the cycles we're in and tell ourselves we're making progress, and tell ourselves we're being courageous, and tell ourselves we're healing, and tell ourselves we're repairing. To really repair is to repair, is to break the pairings we're in and to get lost a bit. The Yoruba people would say, in order to find your way, you must become lost. You must seek other alliances. Because where we're going, we don't know where that is. So this is the crack. This is the break. This is black scholarship. This is decolonial thinking. This is new materialism. This is feminist eco-criticism. This is how we break away from carcerality, how we break away from the violence of our christening, how blackness is more than just an identitarian idea, how blackness is an invitation to a radical hospitality for us to hold our many failures together and also know that that's all right, that we're not going to get this. We're not going to be finally woke. We're not going to arrive. We're not going to have a halo on our heads. We're not going to finish the work. Our work is intergenerational, ancestral, microbial, bacterial, spiritual, socio-material, technological, and ecological. All those things and more. Our work is to sit at the cracks because that's where the work is. to surround the cracks, to stay there, like my wife did when my son had a big moment one day in a shopping mall in Chennai. We don't call it meltdowns any longer. That's my language. And my wife has slapped my head to slap that language out of the family. So she forbade. She said, no, we don't call it meltdowns any longer. We will call it the passing of a wild god. When my son has a big moment, that's the passing of a wild god. That's an invitation to build an altar. One day he has this big moment in a shopping mall, and he's unable to hold stuff. He's triggered by stuff. And I try to gentrify him. Not to any good reputation that I might conceive that I have. I try to gentrify him. I try to pull him together, which is what psychologists do very well, and psychotherapists. And this is the reason why a colleague of mine would say, psychology is the policeman of capitalism. Psychology polices the cracks because it knows that it's where the cracks are, that's where you become different. So it guards the cracks. And so I try to gentrify my son. I try to tell him, it's all right. Don't cry. When I get home, I'll give you a cookie or something. Just don't do it in public where there are 1 billion eyes staring at us right now. And I'm failing miserably at being there for him as his father. Speak about forgiveness. And in that moment, my wife walks up to me and says, walk away. I'll take care of this. And I moonwalk away from there. And then she walks up to him and lies down with him, next to him, on the ground. She doesn't say a word. She doesn't encourage him. She doesn't try to say everything will be fine. She doesn't say, hey, it'll be all right, or you get yourself together. Nothing. She doesn't even say what's wrong. She just stays with him and accompanies him in that errancy. Because in that moment, my son is a zombie ant. And he's breaking away from the neuropathology and the neurotypicality of the familiar. He's doing something with senses and the world that is not available for normalpathy and the ways that we neurotypically think about ourselves. He's breaking away. And so she accompanies him. She attends to the crack. The crack is not your crack or my crack. It's an intensity of a field. It's the emanation of new politics. She lies down next to him, and I watch. And I realize this is how emancipation looks like. And then, after a while, they get up and they walk away. Think about how scandalous it is to lie down with an autistic boy in the middle of a capitalist project that is designed to instigate consumerism. You're supposed to be shopping now, not lying down. But there she is. She just lies down and she's with him. And in that moment, I realized this is what I would rather do. This is what I would rather spend my life doing and exploring. It's at the cracks that we gather people. We gather at the places that may look like failure, that may look like pathology, that may look like disability. Because disability is how the world creates new things. The crack is generative incapacitation. It's not convenient to you. If it's convenient to you, then it's just another one of those things that is part of the toxic cycle that you're used to. It's only the breaks that allows us to do things differently with the world. Where leadership fails, where courage might dither, where healing is not doing the work that we think it wants to do, we go to the cracks, and then we wait, and we sit, and we sing together, and then we wash our feet. That's politics. Let me end with this. That there are mountains all around us, fleeting, temporal. Maybe we are the mountains yet to come for future generations. Maybe Polyphren is inviting us to travel, to become fugitive, and to see the world from new eyes. Okay, that's it.